Greetings and welcome to the Pure Report. I'm your host, Rob Ludeman, and it is time to bring the orange. And I am super excited to bring you the first part of our launch series. That's right, we're doing 3 episodes in support of our September launch that is going down in New York City at the Roadshow. We're going to be covering Intelligent Control Plane, Unified Data Plane, Chad, and also our cyber innovations. And to kick it off, I am thrilled to have my good buddy Chad Kenny here, VP of Product Management at Pure Storage. Are you ready to do this?
I'm super ready. Excited to be here.
I am excited to have you in here always. Just give the folks a little recap on your time at Pure as a long timer who had a little bit of a hiatus and now is back doing so many fun things here.
Yeah, so it's awesome to be back. I was an early Puritan here, employee 68, I think is the actual number.
I always like to write that down. Yeah.
Was one of the first SEs here. Kind of went through a multitude of different roles from CTO of the Americas to the product side of the house in FlashArray, and then came back, got to help architect a lot of the enterprise data cloud storyline and the intelligent control plane really being kind of the main core essence of it. Now I lead the product management team, and so we focus on all of the different platforms, how we bring those to market. It's an exciting time to be here.
It's super fun. I think you came back at a really great time because those were ideas that were kind of bouncing around. It was things that Charlie was having conversations with a lot of us. And then you came in, and then all of a sudden, a couple months, there was some firmness around the vision, around what we're delivering to customers. Talk a little bit more for folks, since this is, a launch podcast and we're covering kind of the basics. Just hit the enterprise data cloud, the overall idea behind it and what we're providing for customers with our platform.
Yeah, so I always like to think about it in like a mode of what are we solving for customers? And if you think about the traditional IT environment, you've kind of got a very legacy way of looking at the world. And a lot of things have evolved. If you look at networking got relatively virtualized, the compute tier got virtualized, but storage had been kind of like held back in like this super legacy world where it was somewhat aligned to particular applications that were deployed. And they typically were not very efficiently deployed. They were managed all very separately. It created silos and fragmented sets of data and the like. So we really started to think about like how could we transform that storage environment, very similar to the way compute transformed in the virtual environment, and make it so that it was effectively one virtualized cloud of data. And that would allow customers to be able to control their data more effectively, be able to get access to it, better efficiencies. And so the enterprise data cloud is effectively oriented around this fundamental transformation of really trying to stitch things together. But it has other key components to it, like a unified data plane that needs to exist alongside this intelligent control plane to really make all of these parts and pieces work together. And the nice part is once it's kind of built, you can deploy things very, very differently than what you did before.
Yeah, what you're seeing are the years of investment in simplicity, right? One of your biggest hallmarks that you always love to talk about, but also that we couldn't go and really execute around this vision if we hadn't made the technological investments and innovations and a commitment to evergreen architecture and the collection of our customers' telemetry data to understand what's going on. You had to have all those components or this type of thing wouldn't be possible. And it would kind of be on the dustbin of history of every other vendor that has talked about some kind of unified control plane type of offering. It just, none of those have really materialized.
Fully agree. And I think like if you think about where we started off with abstracting away many of the complexities that existed within a storage array itself. Things like removing grade configurations and removing the nerd knobs of sorts of configuring things that may cause performance impact or complexities. But what we're doing now is we're effectively taking that same simplicity that we built into the systems and now spreading it across or up-leveling it even further to abstract away the infrastructure effectively and really allow customers to control their data versus manage their storage, right? And I think this is a really fundamental time for both CIOs and traditional operators to really transform the way that they manage their data holistically in a time where they're strained to be able to even deal with the data growth, let alone AI now being added into the mix to really be able to leverage and get value from the data like now. I want to show value now from these things.
Yeah, I was doing a new hire training this morning, and I kind of talked about what we're doing. People were, they're new to Pure, and said, "Well, what is this really? What we're doing?" I said, "Well, think about in the past. Maybe you could call storage admins more storage mechanics, right? They're
Yeah.
mechanics. They're
Yeah.
wrenching. They're
Oh, yeah.
working on things, and instead of being storage mechanics, we're making them into storage strategists. They're actually looking at what does the business require? What are the
Yeah.
business SLAs that are being handed down from the
Definitely.
LOBs?" And then how do we go architect this and create policy, create automation? That's really what we're going to dive into here with launch episode 1,
Yeah.
the intelligent control plane, which really again goes back to your hallmark of simplicity, right?
Yeah.
This is something we're making super super easy. I will hit a quick stat. So one stat I pulled, and I don't remember the source, but 45% of IT teams spend more than 5 hours per week writing scripts for workflows and automations.
Mundane
That's not
tasks. Yeah.
value add, right?
Yeah. It's painful.
It is
Yeah.
super painful. So hit the intelligent control plane
Yeah.
in light of some of these mundane tasks. What is the
Sure.
vision and the reality going to actually look like here?
Yeah, so the funny part, I spend a lot of time with customers, and every time I talk to storage admins, they always have this like worry that they did something incorrect in the
Ah,
deployment of things, right? Like,
human
'cause if you
error.
think about it, there's like a truckload of stuff you got to remember. So let's say you're deploying Oracle, you got to think about, okay, what kind of storage, performance do I need IOPS, and what's the overall capacity? How many snapshots do I need to take for operational recovery? What does it need to be replicated to? What's the replication target? Is it set up or not? Do I have safe mode enabled on the system? Like just a multitude of things that if you forget a step, you effectively open up yourself to, potential inefficiencies or worse, cyber attacks, right? And
Yeah.
so I think one of the first things of this intelligent control plane, beyond stitching the systems together, which was really the fundamental capability we were trying to bring in, was bringing in much more compliance and transforming the way operations happen. But let me talk quickly about kind of what the architecture is so you can get an idea. So instead of building kind of a, let's call it a cloud oriented system that connects to each one of these arrays, we embedded Fusion, which is the enabler of this intelligent control plane, into the Purity operating environment. And this allows to have contextual aware catalog, let's say, across each one of these systems. I like to call it a contextual aware semantics layer, because what we're doing is we are taking the context of which systems are built and spreading it across all of the systems in order for then it to have better awareness to do things. And what's even better about this, and some of the announcements we'll show in a bit, is we're adding more context to that to make this even better. So that gets you the infrastructure transformation. The next thing that the intelligent control plane brings is this operational transformation where we change the way people do things. You no longer have to remember all the steps. Everything's pre-configured and ready to rock. And so you just deploy things knowing that you're following policy. And then the third big transformation is this compliance transformation. I want to validate that what I deployed is still valid and still works great. And so this truly is where this intelligence in the control plane really has a massive amount of value for customers.
I'm glad you mentioned the last one because it really is key to have that feedback loop, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can do all the automation and presets and deployment and configure. Did it actually work? Right? Is
Yeah.
what I did, and then you can get feedback in whatever tool
Oh, yeah.
that you want to get a Slack alert. Do you want to get notified in ServiceNow? Whatever you end up using,
Totally.
it's going to tell you, and not just tell you at the end. We've actually done it so that you can get updated step by step as it's actually happening. Really cool.
One of the other things that I think nobody really thinks about as part of this, right, is like, let's say you had an Oracle production preset, and these presets are constructs that allow you to have all of the configurations, predefined. But imagine you change it like a year later. You've deployed 100 instances of this same preset, and you decided to change something fundamental, like I'm going to make it, instead of 30 days, it's 60 days of snapshots for operational recovery because of whatever business policy. Now you got to go change a whole 100 of
Yeah,
those.
but wait, I've got to go out to every array
Yeah.
to do this.
And it's a pain to actually
Yeah.
keep up with now policy changes that happen. But imagine a world where you can change the preset, and the preset says, "Do you want me to go update all workloads that have been deployed?" Oh my God, the power of that's pretty magical, right? And if you can validate that they're not drifting through, compliance reporting and the like, it's so much power that you have now. You really do transition that world into something that was mundane, like you talked about, to very strategic in nature. I'm validating that we're delivering on policy. I'm validating that we're doing things to protect our business and our data. and I'm getting much more control than I've ever had before.
Yeah, what are people going to do with all the time that they're going to have available?
There's a lot of other things to
But
take
there's a
on.
lot of other really
Yeah, oh,
great
yeah.
things that people can work on. Let's dive into the launch payload that
Yeah.
we talked about, and we are covering where you can go watch the replay of the New York event. We're also offering it here in the podcast in this series. You mentioned earlier about presets
Yep.
and gave a little bit of an overview, but
Sure.
unpack that. We're doing some things around Fusion presets that are extending the capability there, but really important to have that as a foundation for automating.
Sure. Yeah, so presets were actually one of the coolest capabilities I think we built into Fusion, at least so far, which was think about, the challenge we're solving here is customers have all of these different configurations they need to do for a workload they deploy. And instead of them having to remember each one of those and manually do each one of them, you create a preset which has all of those predefined. And when you want to deploy it, you give users options of being able to add in specific customizations if you want, or you can make them declarative where it's just automatically deployed. And the cool part is this becomes kind of the construct of which you track them later down the line. So if you want to look at compliance and see drift, you've got now this context around what the workload was to start with, and you can validate that it's still happening. As we add in some of the other fun capabilities, you get even more context added to it. And so this construct becomes the fundamental deployment model for Fusion, the enabler of this intelligent control plane, to deploy workloads.
And we can now go into modern workloads, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the big announcements is we're extending this into Portworx and now have that capability. Everybody's deploying using
Yeah.
containers now. So it's a natural extension, but also makes a lot of sense why we acquired Portworx a
Yeah.
number of years back, but also shows how we continue not to just have it as a bolt-on, like, oh,
Oh,
you want to do
yeah.
containers, go do. No, we're building this
Fundamental.
into the fundamental workflows,
Yeah.
the Portworx native integration. How do you see this for enterprises kind of
Yeah.
closing the gap between those traditional and there's still kind of that gulf in between,
Sure.
like
Oh,
traditional
yeah.
workloads and containerized modern things.
Yeah.
How does this help?
Yeah, so I think two things were playing if you think about broader trends. There was definitely a lot of net new application development that was focused on containerizing of applications and fundamentally shifting the way that the data sets were being produced. They were less structured than they were before. I think now you're seeing this massive shift between, hey, even my traditional, applications that aren't net new, I would like to find ways to embed more into a highly efficient modern way of deploying virtualization. And in that world, you actually do want, or both worlds, you actually do want kind of a bridge between these two worlds, right? You want to have the awareness of the storage infrastructure, especially as you're building this intelligence to stitch everything together. And you want it to be relevant to your traditional legacy apps. Of course, that's where actually probably most of the inefficiency resides. But you do also need to have the awareness in those modern applications. So it has like fleet-wide awareness. It's no longer just looking at a single system and trying to, understand what's going on and carve up storage from there. It should understand the entire fleet as one holistic thing.
Yeah, which is part of the vision anyway,
Yep.
right? To pull everything together. Great
Yeah.
addition into the portfolio.
Great.
Last year, we do this at Accelerate. It's all running together for me. We talked about AI. We talked about Copilot, right? Our AI
Yeah.
Copilot, right? And the fact that we're enabled by looking at the many, many data points that we get from telemetry data
Yep.
from our customers. And then why don't we take an LLM against that and let you ask questions
Yeah.
instead of doing command line or other GUI types of things? We are extending that, but then also there's a new feature called data intelligence. So I'm
Yeah.
curious the interrelation between the two, because data intelligence also relies upon the fact that we just know all these things because we have
Totally.
the telemetry data.
So I would classify data intelligence being a much bigger thing than what I'm going to talk about right now. But
Okay.
effectively, it is like an additional amount of context that gets added into the workload. So now I know like the application, I can define like the tier. Think of it as like more metadata associated to that workload
Okay.
that now is very contextually aware. With MCP and MCP servers kind of becoming more predominant across the entire environment, now you can take large language models and drive a bunch of context about what's going on in the environment. So you're going to see a really killer demo in New York where we effectively migrate VMs from a virtualized environment into OpenShift and do so by saying, hey, what VMs are most likely to migrate, and you can see all of the VMs for different tiers, and it creates the workflow for you to actually do the migration. And I think the cool componentry of data intelligence in particular is it just adds a lot of context to make
Mm.
you make better decisions. So like as you think of this evolution from a guy who was managing a single storage system with volumes for a particular application to now a world where all of it's stitched together as one giant pool, abstracted away of what the infrastructure looks like. You now have, presets that give you these automatic deployments. Now you have a world where you can actually have a large language model with, natural language capable of understanding what your intent is, going out and getting context to go figure out how to do it, and then actually go execute on it,
Yeah,
which is even crazier. With some of the workflow templates that we're building in, right? And I think we're going to get into those next, but
that's the next part. Yeah, exactly.
but you pair all of these things together, this context awareness, this automation capabilities, you start to bring a lot of power all of a sudden into a world where you were really previously fragmented and challenged to do anything.
I actually be really excited to work with all this, right? I mean, you're
Yeah.
showing customers to this, are they
Yeah.
kind of lighting up with, I can't wait to dig
Oh
in?
yeah.
It just
It's
sounds like just really fun to play with, but then also to actually put in production to use.
every time we talk to customers about this, they're like, literally, how do I get Fusion enabled? And what's killer is it's, in many cases, a firmware upgrade away,
Yeah,
or in many cases, they're already on and they just literally need to create a fleet
yeah. Make your first
and
fleet,
add systems
right?
into
And
it
then just go.
and create a preset and start playing around with it. But the capabilities and power that we're building is absolutely phenomenal, especially with if we jump into workload
No,
templates
let's do it
next.
right now. Last but not least, the workflow templates,
Yeah.
orchestration. Again, kind of the bookend to this whole discussion. You've
Yeah.
seen it sort of build upon itself, and now it's, well, what do customers run?
Yeah.
Right. Well, they run applications and they run workloads, but
Yep.
how do you deploy and manage those? Well, you manage them through workflows,
Yeah.
which can be really, really super complicated, right? Go back to your VM migration to
Totally.
Kubert, with
Yeah.
Kubert kind of thing. Think about the number of people that you have to involve, the process involved, the technology that's involved. It starts to become a
A lot of
three-dimensional
steps.
process to make happen. And now you can have these pre-configured templates as well as this orchestration capability that can really streamline the workflows.
Yeah, what I'm excited about these is, so the two big things we're announcing is we're creating more templates so that we help customers be able to just kind of build these out of the box, which are really nice. The second part is we're building more connectors, so those
Yeah.
connectors can connect to third-party entities or solutions that are out there that allow you to be able to orchestrate them on top of our platform, our enterprise data cloud. And with doing so, you get a huge amount of power. So now not only are you able to kind of create consistency in the way that you deploy things, which is awesome, which gives you kind of day one compliance, but you also have the ability of now orchestrating things outside the storage stack. So as an example, if you wanted to, we showed this demo of an, MCP and contextual aware migrations of VMs to KubeVirt, but what if you just want to deploy a SQL server, right?
Yeah.
And have it configured with all of the policies associated to a production workload? Well, there's a lot of steps in each one of those things. And in most cases, and maybe even have multiple teams working on it. To have like the team holistically say, this is the workflow I want to use, and create a template around it allows people to self-serve and execute on their own without having to engage all of the different resources out there. There's a lot of wins all over the place for
Well,
that
just,
one.
I mean, fewer phone calls, less exposure, less time. I mean, it's all those different things wrapped up into one
Yep.
when you can move to that self-service type of model. It's huge.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, good job on this one.
This
I
was
love it.
this is fun. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll cover it. I'm going to hit you on the hot takes real quick, and I know you did, your usual level of preparation that we do on these things. So this will be fun to do
Sure.
off the cuff, but
Yeah.
but interesting just to kind of get in your head,
Yeah.
and may or may not be related to what we've gone through here, which
Sure.
might be interesting. Hit on a trend or an industry shift. Maybe what we've discussed or beyond it that you think maybe IT leaders are missing, something
Yeah.
they should pay more attention to.
So I think IT tends to be relegated into more of like the very traditional, more manual
Mhm.
ways of thinking about
Mhm.
things. And I think like there's a huge opportunity for transformation in productivity. We didn't talk about that in the front end, but with AI in particular. So Copilot as an example, we started to put all of our telemetry data into Copilot, and then also now all of the Portworx information as well. So now you can get like a holistic view of your entire environment. And as we get more context from like data intelligence and other things, this actually becomes an assistant of yours that you actually can rely upon for very relevant information, not just like find me a document with this information so I can go off and do the manual work, but actually give you the relevant information on your actual telemetry and execute on it
Yeah.
via a template, right?
Agents, right? Yeah.
It's a pretty killer world to actually just be off and say, go analyze this for me. And when you have the answer, come back and then go do something
Yeah.
about it.
Go do it.
And they happen so quickly that I think that fundamental productivity transformation is one key trend that I see, being a really big win for folks over the next few years here. That I think a lot of times Copilot is used in many cases just to look up documents, and it really needs to be looked at much more holistic
Yeah, it
as
can
a
be more of
teammate.
an execution engine,
Yeah.
right? It can be a partner to what
100%.
IT needs to get done. Number two, is there a misconception out there? People look at infrastructure automation and are either skeptical or maybe don't understand a certain aspect of it.
It's funny in my the keynote in Vegas, I kind of said there's been many failings at this, intelligent control plane, right? And one of them was automation platforms in its traditional sense. In many cases, it was just kind of like a bunch of API calls that happened in sequence, but the context was actually the most important. So in many cases, people see automation platforms as, yeah, they're valuable because it takes away a lot of the steps. But I think what we're transitioning folks to do now is you have context. And so context can help you not only be able to define the strategy of your doing things, like the MCP demo we're doing in New York actually goes and gives you a full run play of what's going to happen,
Yeah.
what's the workflow for it. And so you can see each one of the steps and understand the strategy that they're building. So it becomes much more intelligent than it ever has before. So I think the misconceptions of it just being kind of like, low value of just taking on a series of steps is going to evolve quite dramatically into a world where it is a very intelligent partner for you to be able to execute a lot of tasks in a much more compliant and consistent way than has ever happened before.
Yeah, common thread that you keep hitting around back to the data intelligence piece, and
Yeah.
specifically, I think you keep saying context.
Context
right?
is important. Yeah.
Is having the understanding, having the knowledge, because that pervades the ability to do things around compliance and in cyber
Yeah.
and just what you need to know. Like if you know more, then you can explain more, and then you can meet those compliance requirements. Love it.
Great.
What's going to go on in the future? So looking ahead 5 years, people sometimes look at these things as a threat. And I think we've done a really good job of positioning it as an opportunity, right? As a production assistant, as to make IT and make storage people strategists. How does the role of an IT operator change looking ahead 5 years from now? What are the types of things day to day that they will be doing when this vision becomes reality and everybody's using this?
Yeah, it's funny, like storage admins, I don't think ever got patted on the back when the performance great, but they always kind of get like yelled at when the
Exposure,
performance
man.
sucks.
It's always exposure. Yeah.
I think what this does is give them a strategic seat at the table. This is the first time probably in, the storage, history out there where people can go and define the strategy, help define the policies, help showcase new intelligence that they really probably have never seen before. Everything's so siloed and fragmented with zero control or understanding what's going on. Now these guys hold the crown jewels of information of what's really going on in the environment and can help drive the company strategy for how they manage their data, which is more important than just how they manage each one of these storage systems separately. And so I'd say it's a very unique time to help your enterprise as an operator to transform the way that they actually manage their data holistically.
And really getting an important seat at the table, right? You're not just downstream from database or line of business. You're there and actually can inform them and partner with them. Back to your example about the deployment of SQL or deployment of, Oracle using templates. Right now, that's a partnership. There's a breakdown now of maybe some of the silos that have existed in IT.
And even better, as this thing gets more intelligent, think of things like, we talked about a little bit about workload rebalance in Vegas, and we'll talk more in New York, but imagine these systems effectively optimizing themselves. These performance issues you used to get yelled at don't exist anymore in that world. And so now you do actually spend time on much more strategic things than firefighting. And that's a big win for anybody.
I think everybody wants to do that. It's better for job satisfaction, right?
Totally.
For sure. So what's the CTA, right? Obviously, we want people to go out and if you're an existing customer, use Fusion, like set up a fleet, right? Quite simple. If not, get to Purity 6.8.1, 6.9,
6.9
and get there,
good.
right? So get to that. What else?
So I would say I've never, there's never been a more fun time to really transform, storage as a whole. And so I'd say getting Fusion enabled is like the number one thing that's out there. And it's incredibly simple to get up and running. You effectively create a fleet add systems into that fleet, go try out presets and play around with them.
Super fun. Yeah.
And start deploying them. And we love feedback, so we
Yeah.
want to continue to get feedback from customers on areas where we can continue to add value outside of just, the infrastructure transformation, more into how do we build better integrations with third-party products. And so keep the feedback coming. Go try out the technology, and thanks for being a customer.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to provide that feedback, you can head into the Pure community at purecommunity.purestorage.com. And we've got an array management forum, and we would love to hear from you, or share what you've done with presets. That would be kind of a cool thing too. Share the love, if you will. And if you want to learn more about the launch, go to purestorage.com/launch. And I would also plug purestorage.com/fusion, since most of what we've talked about here with Intelligent Control Plane is Fusion based. And there's even a test drive out there if you want to go and try it out on your own. Hey, thanks, Chad. This was a good time as always.
Always fun. Thank you so much for
Always easy
having me.
with you. Always super easy and super fun. Thank you out there for checking out this episode of the Pure Report. Please tune in again when we get the episode out for Unified Data Plane. And following that, we'll be doing the Cyber Innovation, so that you get everything that we're covering at this really exciting launch that we're doing in New York on the 25th. With that, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Tell a friend, share the episode to a colleague, and we'll keep the great guests like Chad Kenny coming on to the program. And with that, we will wrap. For Pure Storage and Chad Kenny, this is Rob Ludeman saying, don't look back. Something might be gaining on you.